That's all I was just, was it, mixed bag or was it?
No.
Yeah.
It's pretty open.
Everybody goes to Carolina. I figured.
Yeah, yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March meeting of the Camden County Board of Education. I'd like to ask any members if there's any consideration of open session agenda changes. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Motion by Dr. Banks to approve the March 11th, 2021 meeting of the Camden County Board of Education. Seconded by Mr. Heath. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. If you would, please consider a moment of silence. Thank you. Public comment. Dr. Farrell, has anyone signed up?
No, sir.
Great. All right. Could all please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance, led by our student board member.
I pledge
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tonight, the Camden County Board of Education would like to spotlight Ms. Anita Robinson, principal at Camden Intermediate School. This time, I would like to ask Ms. Robinson to join me. Ms. Robinson recently participated in the 2020-21 Distinguished Leadership in Remote Learning Environments Program, called DLR, which is sponsored through the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and developed and provided by the North Carolina Principals and Assistant Principals Association. DLR was developed to help school leaders successfully navigate the instructional leadership challenges they faced during the pandemic. The program coordinator of NCTAPA informed Dr. Farrell that Ms. Robinson has successfully completed the DLR program. Principals who have successfully completed the program have participated in all three components of the program. They have participated in 7 synchronous webinars and have completed the online job-embedded asynchronous assignments for each of the components that are directly applicable to their school-specific improvement activities. The program took place over approximately 15 weeks. There are 3 components that are completed, all of which are directly aligned to the research-based performance evaluation standards adopted by the State Board of Education for the North Carolina school leaders. And those components are: component 1, developing a shared vision for high-quality instruction in a remote hybrid learning environment. Component 2 is promoting and developing teacher effectiveness through evaluation and coaching in a remote hybrid learning environment. And the third component is creating a collaborative, equitable culture of high expectations for students and staff in a remote hybrid learning environment. So on behalf of the Board of Education, I want to congratulate you on this achievement and sincerely thank you for your commitment to the staff and students of Camden Intermediate School. So I present you with the spotlight of the Camden County Board of Education, presents this certificate to Mr. Robinson for outstanding contributions to the Camden County Public School System. Thank you. Open session to appear.
No one has requested to appear.
That's the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Abbott to approve the consent agenda,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Purcell. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Information updates, the 2021 end of year events. Dr. Farrell?
So you've been provided with a list of end-of-year events from central office and from each school. And we wanted to share that with you, but also to find out if you have any questions, comments, concerns in the days of COVID. And as we approach the end of our school year and hold events that are going to bring our students and staff together in groups. Okay. Decide what's interested in prom.
Yes, so right now, prom is probably gonna be outside. We're still looking for locations, we're getting a tent because with weather, we're concerned about it. So we're looking at using a company that does outdoor proms, with things like that. So that's what we're looking at right now. We technically could do it indoors in the gym. We limit our numbers a little more with that because of the amount we can have, because we can have 7 per 1,000 square feet, with that. So we figured that out too. So we can have more outside. So that's what we're looking at doing now. We're actually finalizing with the company this week. So that's what we're looking at doing. We decided we were on the fence between doing a junior senior or just a senior prom, because the seniors didn't get a prom last year. So had we not done one this year, they wouldn't have gotten one this year either. But with doing it outside, the capacity, we can do both juniors and seniors. So that's where we're headed right now. We're just, the thing outside is electricity, trying to make sure we have enough to, have a DJ. I said I'd just, play a boombox, but they weren't down with that. The kids weren't. So anyway, so that's what we're looking at for outside.
Thank you.
Any others?
Graduation.
That I would like some guidance from you all. I think whatever we end up doing, we're kind of in a weird spot this year because last year we had so many restrictions at graduation time, and right now we're kind of in that in between spot where we have what we've been told is capacity for our stadium with that. So right now it's 450 that we can have in our stadium capacity. So it's kind of one of those things that, like I said, I would like some guidance because we are talking about kind of polling, our parents and our seniors to see what they think. However, I'd kind of like some parameters for what I'm polling them with, because I don't want to offer a full graduation if there's no way that can happen, and then put that out there because that's what everybody's going to want, because of course that's what everybody wants. So that's kind of where I am with that. And then my worry is, even if we do outside and we have things, if we have to move inside, that cuts the number of tickets down drastically, with that.
So what are the options that you all have discussed?
Well, the options we've discussed, you have everything. You have a full graduation, but that's going to, technically put us over what now is our capacity. If we were to do a graduation outside and give them each tickets based on our capacity, you would look at each graduate getting 3 to 4 tickets is where you're at. If we have to move it inside, then it becomes even less, because right now inside you can only have 250. So we have approximately 92 seniors graduating this year with that. So that's where we go with that. We've also, and we've been talking to seniors all along, we have the individual graduation. You could split them into 2 groups and do one group now, one group then, and they get extra tickets for that. we talked about that, like A through M, graduation at 10, N through Z at 12. With that, you could do individual graduations like we did last year. We got a lot of positive feedback on that. And then even if we did the individual graduations this year, I would like to do a graduation for the whole class at the end, because we can do that with the numbers and have the 92 come back and hold an actual ceremony where they have their speaker and things like that. So, we've kind of run the gamut with that. It just kind of depends on kind of direction I'm given for what I'm allowed to do with that. I don't want to break any regulations.
The capacity of 450, is that accounting for the bleachers stands only? Is that accounting for opening up more of the football field?
Yeah, your sports arena, you can have 40%. So based on those numbers, that's what it is right now. And that could change by June, but right now that's where we are.
Well, could you stretch that if you were to use more of the football field itself and give more room for distancing?
No, it basically says your whole arena, your whole stadium, you're able to use 40% of what the bleacher capacity is what's currently the regulations we have.
So 450 include the student, staff,
Well,
everybody?
it depends on how you want to stretch it. So for athletics, for example, 450 does not include coaches, players,
Right, that's
staff.
why I'm asking.
So if you want to say that the graduates are the players,
I want to say open
I'm
up to
the
a full
coach,
graduation.
and
I'm not
then-
making any bones about it. I
yeah,
want
so
to say
I
do a
mean,
full
you
graduation. I'm not
couldn't
worried
look
about
at it
the
that way. We talked about looking at it that way. You know what I'm saying? So then that would increase, that would take probably 125, people out of the equation that would be there if you didn't count them.
How long for your polling of parents and emailing and everything, when do you need the board to give you that guidance?
As soon as possible. Just because we have to start planning with that. I mean, graduations do take some time, especially if we're doing something different than a traditional typical graduation. It takes a lot of time to put into place. So, as soon as we can, and people are already asking, plus dates, if it's gonna be, things like that. So the sooner we can know, definitely the better.
That 40% capacity, is that coming from the state directly, or is that coming from like the athletic association?
It's both. I believe the Athletic Association sent it to us, but it's based on legislation that has been put into place, from what I understand.
I was just wondering if it was just pertaining to athletics only, maybe, I guess not.
There's 2 bills moving through right now, the Let Them Play, Let Us Watch, and one that's specific to graduations and other outdoor events. It's moving through Raleigh, trying to open that up wider, to, if it's outside, let them do what we need to do to make it happen.
And even if we planned one way and then those bills did pass and we were able to do it, it's a little easier to go ahead and say, okay, we're doing a traditional graduation with that. But if we can't, that's where we need the plan in time to make sure we've got everything in place.
So what if we put all of the options together in a blurb or in, different paragraphs?
Yes, sir.
Let the board see it,
Uh-huh.
poll the parents about which of those they prefer, and then bring that back to the board. What are your thoughts on that?
That's great. Yeah. Get that done.
Can that be brought back before the next meeting if they're gonna need that kind of time frame?
That's what I was going to ask.
So we have
Do you
a-
need a time frame before the April meeting?
It would be nice. The more time we have, the better.
We have a budget work session next week.
Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna leave you enough time to get the word out to the parents and really get a good feedback, do you think?
Oh,
Just a
they
week?
will respond. quickly.
Seniors are waiting on that.
I think they will respond. I'll send out a bright air. I'll put it on everywhere. So we can get feedback. But yeah, I believe they will respond quickly with that.
So maybe if we could get the blurbs of the options to them tomorrow,
And then if you all have any input on that individually with me, then I can get that back to Ms. Davis, and then we can decide or she can decide how to poll parents with that, and then give them a quick turnaround on that. And I agree with her, they're probably ready to roll. They want to know what we're doing. And then we have a budget work session next week where we could advertise and whatever we need to do to be able to discuss that item there, if that works. I knew those were the two big ones. Are there any others?
I mean, I just comment on the list. I think it's very good and to commend staff that are trying to hold events and get things as close back to normalcy as possible. And so that's very much appreciated. I like to thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? We have an update from our student board member.
I'll start with GPS. GPS enjoyed Character Day. The parents, students, and teachers were very creative. GPS would like to thank all those who took help and time to create a video. It definitely helped build the love of learning. March 16th will be wearing green. March 17th is Pie Day, and teachers will enjoy pizza and apple pie. And March 19th is March Madness, dress in college gear. March 23rd is Spring Pictures. And GPS would like to thank Ms. Mazzell in appreciation for all she does, not just during school, social worker week, but all year long. And then for the intermediate school, Camden Intermediate School is kicking off their first annual Sign of Suicide program for 6th grade students. SOS is a universal school-based prevention program designed for middle school and high school students. The goals of this program is to decrease suicide and suicide attempts by increasing student knowledge and adaptive attitudes about depression. For the middle school, CMS 8th grade students have completed the registration process in preparation to transition to the high school next year. The CMS Future Farmers of America Club celebrated FFA Week, February 22nd through the 26th. Students and teachers had a great time dressing out to show their FFA spirit on the themed days. CMS celebrated their bus drivers during Love the Bus Week by providing them with a Chick-fil-A breakfast. We will always have a great time celebrating the hard work of our bus drivers. Spring sports season has started at CMS, and they're excited to see their CMS football, soccer, volleyball teams, and cheerleaders represent CMS, showing their Cub Nation pride. CMS Cub Council is sponsoring their Spring Spirit Week on March 22nd through March 25th. Students can participate in the following theme days. Monday is Maui Monday. Tuesday, Together We Win. Wednesday, We Love Our Cubs. Thursday, Throwback/Twin Day. And for the early college, Camden Early College's application process opened up online February 1st. Brochures and flyers were sent to CMS to distribute to the 8th graders. The deadline to submit a completed application was March 8th. The application process online this year included a video about CECHS and a PowerPoint about the application process. Mrs. Black and Mrs. Lassiter went to CMS to answer any questions that students had on February 9th and 11th. We held 2 parent question-answer sessions on February 16th. As of Monday morning, we had 39 applicants. Interviews are set up via Zoom on March 17th and the 26th. And for the high school, we held our fundraiser dinner for Quavon Christian on February 19th and appreciated everyone's support, especially those who worked the fundraiser on such a cold night. We celebrated FFA Week, February 22nd through the 26th, with students and staff dressed up in various themes. Our juniors took the ACT on February 23rd, and our sophomores will take the pre-ACT on March 31st. We will be offering the ASVAB on March 31st as well. The first half of our spring sports season is still underway. We wrapped up basketball and swim, and we had a really good first home football game on February 26th. Men's soccer season is still going strong, and practice has begun for softball. We completed rising freshman registration last week and are in the midst of our upperclassmen registration for the 2021-2022 school year. Homecoming is April 1st, and we will have a modified Spirit Week the week of March 29th through April 1st, and are busy making plans for prom.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for our student board member? Thank you. In your pack, you have your monthly financial summary. Is there any questions? As Ms. Norfleet is here with us tonight for. All right, thank you. Action agenda, new high school project. We have with us Mr. Rick Ott with MB Con and Mr. Ashley Dennis with Mosley Architects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Farrell. Pleasure to be here again, and just as general principle, I'd like to thank the voters and the citizens of Camden County for allowing us to be here. It's pretty exciting, and we need to continue to thank them for their contributions to this project. Ashley and I have a relatively short presentation, which is always kind of interesting, and it's taken us months to get this far, and we're going to show you the fruits of that labor, kind of get some input from the board, and then see what your pleasure is moving forward. We'll start with the design updates. Just to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing after we got our funding in place, and we are moving down the path of USDA loan. Some of those loan documents are awaiting on decisions by the board. There are some scoping documents that we need to produce for the county, and I've kind of got them drafted and on hold until we get through tonight. Ashley has met with most of the high school staff, the leadership in the district. I think we've got some feedback from some of the board members as well on different aspects of the project. We have taken all of those comments to heart. We've tried to work in as many of those comments and suggestions as possible, and Ashley will talk a little bit more about that. We also talked a little bit about budget and alternates. We'll talk a little more about that tonight at a little later point in time. And so I think we've got a revised layout. I'm going to ask Ashley to talk a little bit about the process for getting a site plan approved, and then also kind of some of the parameters that we work with schematics. So Ashley, come on up.
Thank you, Rick. And again, Chairman, board members, Dr. Farrell, thank you for giving me the opportunity to give this update. So here you see the site plan, and I'm going to kind of walk through some of the overall. As Rick said, we're going to basically need to be moving forward with this almost more quickly than we are with the building, because we're looking to do the early site package so that we can get ground moving during the non-wet months of our year. When we start looking to move dirt during the fall, it really becomes a battle of the wits of trying to move dirt while it's raining, and it's really just not an ideal time. So what we're seeing here is the overall plan. We have gotten feedback finally from NCDOT. They have reviewed this plan with Timmons. One thing that we were running into was we thought we were going to have one point of entry onto the site and one point of entry off of, or exit off of the site. They have agreed that those two curb cuts or entry points that you see there onto the road can actually be entry and exit points, which creates a lot more safety on the site versus just on the road. So now we can provide better circulation for students, staff, parents, and buses on the site. The building is situated facing the main road. One thing that's different from our last presentation to the board was that the main entry drop was actually out on the front of the school site. Now that's near the rear of the school, and we'll kind of talk through some of that as we move through the layout. The ball fields are in a very similar location. There was a lot of input on kind of how those were laid out, and we are trying to do a centralized athletic building within that ball field area so that that can contain not only ticketing, but concessions, your restrooms for all of the play fields, and any storage that'll be needed not only for athletics, but also lawn equipment and various things like that. So looking to kind of provide that one building and not multiple outbuildings. Then we'll go to the next slide. I believe actually kind of zooms in. Yes. So this kind of I'll walk you through kind of the circulation around the site. So the upper circulation is primarily our student lots. So the students would come in and circulate around. The larger lots are for the student parking. We do have some parking on that side for some staff, as well as the self-contained and EC children drop-off areas so that those students are not having to travel as far from like the bus lot. So there's some parking up there for parents to drop off students, as well as an area for the bus to drop off for those students. Then we have the student lots that I mentioned. Those also can serve our playfields for the larger events. You will see that there is still a connector road between the upper area and the lower area, but there are lines that actually delineate off that space. So that is only there for flexibility. That is something that we're still working through with NCDOT. That portion of road that's kind of on the north side up against that soccer field would not be used for loading and unloading the building. That would only be used for events where there would be a need to have circulation all the way around the site. Again, we're still working through if that is absolutely necessary, since it isn't used for primarily most of any of the circulation around. Then if we go to the next entrance onto the site, this entrance is for our buses and our parent drop off, and and for staff as well. So that the drop off is on the rear of the site. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move into the building. But so all of our student lot and our parent drop off will be coming in into a main commons area. And then the buses will pull up and they're actually queued along the curb. This is the safest way for them to unload. And so we'll have those queued up on the south side, along with some staff parking. And then there's space for 5 buses to still remain on site and then be easily be able to enter back into the queue when it's pick up the end of the day. There is also a lot that is currently labeled event parking. Right now, our parking calcs based on the county ordinance are much higher than what is here at the existing high school, or what is actually needed based on the student population and how many staff there are. So we're looking to talk about possible variances from the county on if we can kind of drop that the number of parking spaces down. So that's why that's called event parking, because we're about somewhere around 100 spots, maybe a little less extra than what is actually needed. So that doesn't really have a name right now. It's not like staff lot or student lot for that very reason. So and then we have visitors at the front, and that would still remain the main visitor entrance at the front of the school. That's where our admin will be located, but that won't be where all of the students come in. All right. Yep. So then there's a lot of things that you'll see here that are similar to what was shown in our last presentation to the board, but I'll kind of walk through how this is laid out. So I'll kind of start at that main entry for the high school. So we have our main admin there, and then moving north, kind of going up that perpendicular to the main spine there corridor, we have our academic pods for the high school. And these are the general classroom pods. And so you'll see that we have our general classrooms, we have our staff space, we have our science classrooms. You can also see the self-contained classrooms up there in that northern corner, thinking back to the site plan where those were associated to that drop-off. And then we have our extended learning areas along with the general classroom. So a majority of those are opening up into that extended learning area to provide project-based learning spaces, spaces for larger groups to get together, smaller groups to get together, a really flexible space intended for those. There are also 2 CTE spaces associated with that lower pod there. Those are primarily the more classroom or computer-based CTE spaces. We can talk about that a little bit more as I get back over into the CTE wing, but they're associated with that pod. Then if we move further south, you can see some more pink space there. Those spaces are actually what have kind of been dubbed the bridge space. So these spaces are spaces that are utilized by not only the high school students, but the early college students. So it made sense to have some association right there between the two schools. So we have our clinic and our guidance in the pink, and then we have our media center. We also have the JLP program in that kind of bridge area, just because it is serving both the early college, high school, as well as the high school. And then that lower pod there is the early college. You can see their administration area and then their general classrooms and science classrooms, again, flanking that extended instructional area. So if we go down the main corridor towards the rear of the school, the double door cluster you see there kind of in the middle, that's where the bus riders would enter the school. And then as we go further down, we have our CTE and arts wing to the north and the athletics cluster to the south. And so all of the light pink is our CTE that consists of various labs as well as classrooms that are associated with those labs and their storage, again, associated with those various programs. Then we also have a staff and conference room space for teachers in that wing. And we have our art space and our band space. Both of those are positioned where they are. Arts needs an outdoor patio space. It is really messy. They're constantly spraying spray paint or cleaning out brushes or things like that really do create a little more mess than your standard general classroom. And so having that outdoor space is very important, along with our band classroom having access to not only be able to load equipment in and out for competition, so they're near the student drop off, but also being able to get equipment easily out to the play fields and their practice field. Then the blue area is all of the athletics, and then that larger yellow area is a combined dining and commons area. And so that is oversized for just the dining because we have combined some of the common space in that. It serves as a pre-event space for not only the gymnasium, but then the future auditorium you can see there is situated to the upper edge of that yellow space. And then our kitchen is to the lower area along with the general receiving so that we can keep all of the deliveries in one spot. Athletics, we have our main gym and all of the support spaces, locker rooms, weight room, etc. along there. You'll see that we have future auxiliary gym labeled. Rick will discuss that a little bit later on in the presentation, but we are still accounting for the location of that when it comes to the site plan layout as well as the building layout. And then we also have future expansion for classrooms, expanding out each classroom wing in the future, as well as some anticipation that early college could also expand and providing expansion space for 2 classrooms there. I think that is the end of my presentation. Well, and one other thing that I will mention. So what we see here is schematic design. You know, we've mentioned that that's kind of what we're here for approval on is the schematic piece. So these are the big boxes and the big pieces, and we'll get further into the details. You know, it's easier to move these pieces, but there still is a lot that goes in with it because all the pieces still have to fall in with what DPI requires and things like that. So a lot of thought has been put into how we still accommodate all of DPI's needs, but still all of the meetings that we've had continue to acknowledge the needs of the high school itself and how the staff and students and administration will utilize the space. So as we get further into design development, we'll continue the conversation, continue getting further into the details along with casework, doors. We told many of the groups we met with, don't get too hung up if a door isn't exactly where you want it to be, because obviously those things will start to shift. This is more of a big picture of adjacencies and general space layout.
Don't go too far, Ashley. We'll have you back up in just a minute. I do want to point out one of the things that we promised to the community was that we would have adequate room for growth at this new high school. You can see we've allowed for growth at both of the pods. Effectively, you could duplicate each of those pods. You wouldn't have to build them at the same time. That would add approximately 450 students. We have room at the end of the early college also to add 2 to 4 additional classrooms. So you could pretty much get about 1,100, maybe even 1,200 students on this campus when it was completely built out. And hopefully that's going to be quite some time from now, but we do want to make sure that what we build for you will allow you to grow into the future. Again, we've shown a position for the future auditorium. It's in the right spot it needs to be. And then we've also shown a future auxiliary gym, and I'm going to be talking about that in just a little bit more detail. That was some of the comments that we got during the review process. So let me go back through the budget again. Very important to keep budget in mind as we go through this project. That's part of what you folks hired me to do. Our approved budget for the project is a little over 45 million bucks. We've got another $840,000 approximately of off-site road improvements that will be paid by NCDOT. That's not something that would be paid by the taxpayers in Camden County. And we've kind of broken this down into various categories, and we are trying to maintain that budget. And if we deviate from the budget, I want to make sure that we're bringing that information to the board and what we're doing to kind of quote, get it back in budget. So I don't have my glasses with me, so I'll kind of give you the best shot we can. If you take out the auxiliary gym, we had a little over 121,000 square feet. Ashley did a tremendous job of getting the schematics down. There were a number of programmatic changes from our original program. After we went back and kind of validated that program with the staff, there were some additional changes. We're building a little over 1,000 additional square feet, not building, but we've currently got that. We're hoping we're going to be able to tighten up just a little bit more when we get to the next D&D level. But that's about 270,000 bucks over what our current budget is, just based on square footage. The site development is a little bigger issue. Currently, the site plan that Ashley showed you is about 675,000 over the $4 million allowance that we had. So you add both of those up, it's a little less than $1 million, but not by much. And so one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight is some of the ways that we can get that site work back down. I'm certainly not panicked by the additional square footage at schematics at this point in time. We're going to work closely with Mosley to get that back down in the budget. But one of the comments that we did have if you folks will recall, after we started looking at the original program, the original needs, we went through a series of some pretty major budget cuts. We reduced the project budget by a little over $19 million. There were a lot of things that we had to give up to get down to the 45 million. And you may recall the board's basic command to me was no more than a 10-cent tax increase. And so that really brought us back at a $45 million budget, coupled with the North Carolina grant funds that we have. So one of the things that were part of those cuts is we reduced the outdoor athletics allowance. We had about $2.5 million set aside for those outdoor fields and felt like we would build as much as we could afford. We had approximately $2 million that were set aside for an alternate for the auxiliary gym. One of the comments that we got from a number of folks is that they felt like getting the outdoor fields completed up front was a higher priority than an auxiliary gym at this point in time. that the auxiliary gym was something that could be brought on in the future, but it was going to be really hard to go into a new high school and not have all the necessary outdoor play fields that you needed for your sports activities. So what we've effectively done, or proposing, obviously we need the board's permission to do this, is we're going to set aside the ad alternate dollars for the gymnasium, for the auxiliary gym, and put those ad alternate dollars against the ball fields and those outdoor fields. And that would move our budget up to a little over $4.5 million, which we think if we work hard enough, we can pretty much get all of those fields that we need to have, along with the restrooms, concession stands that Ashley talked about as part of the overall outdoor athletic complex. It'll be tight, but we're planning on doing that. The other thing that really we have tried to do is to provide some funds to get synthetic turf on the football field. Over time, it is a huge money savings in maintenance alone. It also allows you to have a multi-use field for practices, for a lot of different events and activities, whereas you would never want to do that on a natural turf field. You can certainly have those kind of activities on a synthetic turf field. And while it's a little more money up front, it quickly pays for itself in 7 to 10 years just in savings in maintenance costs, fertilizer, mowing grass, sprinkler systems, all of that sort of thing. And so we are adding the synthetic turf into the fields themselves. The site work, we've identified up front a couple of items that we can reduce. Ashley mentioned the portion of the road that circles around. We actually could access that through that parking lot, not build that road portion there, and that would save us about $100,000. We've got a $95,000 estimate up there. We would still have a gate and access through the student parking if for whatever a reason we did need to be able to access completely around the site. We have two entrances into the visitor parking out front. We can eliminate one of those and make it two-way traffic. Now, I don't know whether where we've got it clouded on the top side of the site or on the lower side of the better of the two, but we can save about $25,000 just to have a one-way in and then reverse traffic lane coming back out. There would not be that much traffic in the way of visitors, and typically those visitors are coming at a different time when you've got most of the traffic. And obviously the loop road would be on the south end for parent drop off and that sort of thing. So I will say I feel much more comfortable with two-way traffic on this road than I did before with North Carolina wanting circular traffic all the way around the site. So by eliminating a portion of that roadway, that would save us about $24,000. Ashley mentioned that we're building about 100 spaces more than we need for the high school. That is because some of the parking regulations that I don't think were written around a high school, so to speak. I think they were probably written around retail establishments and that sort of thing. And so if we bring the parking back to what you need, plus a little extra for growth, we could save about $170,000. And keeping in mind, we're about $675,000 over on the site work alone. So those three things there would knock off a pretty good chunk of that $675,000. We need to talk to the county about that, and we will be doing that in the near future, obviously with the board's permission to do so. So budget and schedule are two important components. Ashley touched on it a little bit. You know, we in the construction business are a lot like farmers. We have a constructing season, and there are certain kind of activities that we can construct the things that we do in the planning and design phase impacts the construction activities greatly. I'll also say, I want to take whatever time is necessary to make sure we get this design the way you want it. And the schematic portion is very important to us. The planning is very important. I can rush Ashley along and her engineers in the D&D and the construction document phase. We are planning on doing an early site package for this project because, one, we anticipate having the early site package. And I'm kind of saying right now, May might get pushed to June, but I really need to start grading in July in order to have a building pad ready for the building when it comes along in late fall. If we miss the July, maybe early August timeline is as far as we can push it, then we could not have graded this past winter. And that means it's not just a couple of week delay, it's a month's delay in order to start the actual construction on the project. So that's one of the reasons we're pushing as hard as we can in the design phase. Same way, once we get that building pad ready, I need to get foundations and slabs poured before, again, the wet weather really sets in January, February, March. And once we get that work done, things like structural activities, masonry, roofing, those are the things that we can do in the wintertime. But the work where we're in the ground, that's the things that we need to try to tackle this summer and early fall while the weather is good. We are proposing a groundbreaking in May of this year. I'd like to go ahead and set a date. And I know a lot of folks are going to be excited about that. We thought it would be nice to have the groundbreaking prior to the graduation, Amber, for the new high school, while everybody's still here and before they hopefully get off on vacation this year. We can really have a good time breaking ground for the new school. So we would look to Dr. Farrell and you folks to pick out a date and we can get started planning for that. The actual site work would start in July, hopefully, would run through January. First thing we would do is get the building pad. We anticipate the building construction starting in November and currently right now running through September of 23. I hope to pull that in to August, maybe July. But one of the reasons we are where we're at on the occupancy date is there's some tenuous sort of ties to the actual USDA loan funding and the payback schedule. So I'm juggling a lot of things on the front end, and I'm juggling making loan payments in different fiscal years so that we don't have any shortfalls of revenue in order to make loan payments for USDA. And we're not anticipating that until the 23-24 fiscal year. So Ashley and myself are ready to answer some questions.
How much parking will we have minus the 92?
About a little over 300 parking spaces.
How's that compared to what the current high school has? Does
I
anybody know?
think you have what, 270, about 270 now?
So we'll be gaining 30.
30, but there's actually a lot more parking if you think about this road that we're building around.
Park on the edge of the road.
Right.
Now,
So
in this area where you're eliminating the 92, would that be, as long as it's not wet, conceivable, I guess you could park overflow there too, possibly? Or is it going to be totally?
we very could, put some kind of stabilized soil. It probably primarily is going to be used during football games.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Football games, we have an issue with parking.
Right. We're still going to have a lot of parking available. And, if you think about all of the other asphalt that you're going to have, there is a lot of parking that could be utilized.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, parking on the edge of the roads around the school is a lot better than having to park on the edge of the highway like they do now.
Exactly. I think we can more than accommodate it. And if I had my $19 million back that we had to cut out
Oh,
of the
yeah.
project, I could build you I could build you a parking garage, but
Right.
we don't have that.
How many, and this is more directed to Amber, out of the 270 you have on campus, how many are used by students and staff? I mean, are we full, non-COVID times, pre-COVID, are we fairly full up every day, or is there wiggle room already?
School year, yes, sir. We've sold all the student parking places and the staff parking places, and we have about 2 or 3 visitor spots, I think, out front. So we are pretty full. But we also, we also counted like a bunch of the spaces behind the field house into that total number that we've kind of made into parking spots that aren't technically in the parking lot, if that makes sense. We just kind of counted how, where everybody parks, and look at how many parking spots we have here. And I know when we estimated like staff parking, I think, we went over like what we currently have, so we get all that new staff and all that later on, with the new building. So.
Well, and that's where I'm getting at is
Yeah, we did. We
picking up
kinda
30
talked
doesn't
about
sound
it.
like that much when the growth we've been telling people we're expecting. I just want to make sure that 300 is, growth for a few years. Obviously, I don't expect it to be forever. We'll be in that limit, but it's going to get us through quite a few years, I'm hoping, before we would need to expand parking.
Quite a few years. Plus, we're going to have the space so that if you do need it in 5 or 10 years as the school grows, you could always come in and add that park.
I guess the 675 is a projected, based on soil borings, I'm assuming, and what you're thinking of cut and fill. We haven't had any actual bids yet or RFPs put out or anything for the actual site.
We don't have any bids yet.
So
We
get
actually,
lucky, I guess, and get some
we
good
actually
bids.
took site work bids on the new library for the county. And so we have some pretty good unit pricing. That soil is similar to what we're doing. That pricing really is right in line with the estimates that we've been using. We may get a little bit more that we can save, because it's a bigger site. But,
Yeah,
I don't want to roll the dice with the
Right.
county's money.
I'm just thinking in my head, maybe we get lucky, get good bids, and if that 675 shrinks, hopefully, if we're lucky.
Well, if we get lucky, then we can add things back.
Right. Well, maybe we can just put gravel out there or something, if we got just enough. or something.
Well, the other thing is, you don't want to build more parking or building than you need,
Right,
because you have to maintain it and you have to top coat it periodically and that sort of thing. So you only really should build what you need. And then if you need additional spaces later, let's build at that point in time.
You may have hinted at this towards the end about the loan repayment schedule. I wrote down, based on the schedule you just presented for timeline, I was wondering if we were going to hit a point where the grant money would run out and we'd start moving into having to make loan repayments before we had the full 2 years to build the piggy bank of tax money that we had banked on.
The answer to that is no.
Okay.
The way it works with the USDA, and I will say, I know this county has a little experience because you did a school with USDA loans. And in that particular case, you got your loan money up front. That was an unusual circumstance because they had money that they needed to use before fiscal year was over. So you got your money up front. The way it works now is effectively you get a commitment letter from USDA. Right now, interest rates are super low, 2.12% or something like that on a 30-year loan, tremendously low. And so, but you don't get that money until the project is either 90% complete or complete. So we're going to need some short-term interim finance. And once we run through the state's money, and we've got a cash flow that we provided through the county's financial advisor and also to the county that shows that we would use the state's money first. And then we start borrowing for a very short period of time, about a year. Again, those interest rates would probably be less than 1%. That money would be repaid with the USDA loan when we got it at the end of the project. So if we finish the project in, let's just say, August of 23, you would not make the first USDA loan payment until August or September of the 24-25 fiscal year. And so that's what we are trying to do. That allows you to build up a contingency fund of revenues in order to make those payments. And so it's not complicated, but it is, we're again, kind of working around our construction schedule in order to minimize any tax impacts for the taxpayers.
You said you were planning on hopefully breaking ground, or actually breaking ground with the equipment in July. You know when y'all plan on putting that RFP out?
The bids on that, I think we're showing that, let's see if I can read that. Get back to my schedule. Site development, we're trying to bid it in May or June. I'll tell you, we're not in control of our destiny on that. We have to have approval from NCDOT. We have to have approval from the county's stormwater management folks. That position with the county has been vacant. When I last talked to Mr. Bowman, they were either had somebody in mind they were bringing in, or were pretty close to bringing someone in. And so he has promised us that this is the most important project right now for them, and that we'll try to get in there. But again, it is subject to those reviews and approvals. Our biggest hurdle, which was Army Corps in wetlands, we really got lucky there. The wetlands survey that had been done 8 or 10 years ago, they found was sufficient, so we didn't have any additional wetlands that we needed to deal with. So that was a real blessing. I think if we can just get lucky a little bit, and COVID is now kind of burned out, and so people are coming back to work, but it has been really difficult, and it's added months on getting projects and sites permitted because of the delays due to COVID. But we are working as hard as we can to hit that July window to start grading.
And I guess you're gonna set up like a website where you'll post those RFPs if local contractors wanna bid?
We are doing just that. They will all be publicly advertised. We are already soliciting interest and marketing the project to a number of different contractors. They are all well aware of it, and we're going to get good bid turnout participation. Dr. Farrell, I'm sure Dr. Farrell and Mr. Lawrence will be very eager to sit on those bid openings.
Always interesting.
Yes, sir.
Going back to the
Sorry, Dr.
artificial-
Banks.
You're fine. Going back to the artificial turf. Are we talking about artificial turf for just the football field
Yeah,
alone?
yes, sir.
Or the other fields together?
No,
Just the football field?
Just football field, just a football field. And that's about $300,000 for that artificial turf. A little bit more than
Versus
that.
how much for natural turf?
Well, the 300,000 is the premium that you would pay for synthetic turf over the natural turf. And I provided Dr. Farrell with some of the life cycle cost analysis on that. The payback is very, very short. But in my opinion, that's part of the issue. But the other part is you get to use that football field for so many more activities that you otherwise would not have done. So it really becomes a multi-use field. Band practice, football practice, soccer field practice. There's just a lot of things that you could do on that field that you couldn't do on natural turf.
Well, a question I could imagine one of our community members asking me is, you also have a practice field. That field could be used for alternate activities. So if a artificial turf football field lifespan 10 to 12 years,
20 years plus.
20?
20 years plus. When you saw the site plan, we did have some areas for practice fields in case we need them. Again, anytime we put in a field, especially on this site, we're going to have to put in the subsurface drainage and that sort of thing to keep the field usable. Or not, it'll just become a big mud hole. if we are able to use the synthetic turf, then we may not need to build that practice field. We really are gonna see just how far those dollars will go, get the bids in. One of the things that we really used up was a lot of the contingency for the project. We have about $750,000 in owner contingency that we can actually add to that. But at this point in time, I really don't want to touch that pot of money. We need to hold that off until we get all our bids in hand, and then we can start seeing what we need to add and can add back. Other questions?
Can you go over what the total athletic complex facilities look like again?
Yes, sir. Ashley, you want to maybe step up there and kind of point some of those things out?
Cost total or just total in general related to what is up on the field layout? I should do this so you can actually hear me. Are you looking for cost totals or just the layout?
Well, layout right
Okay.
now.
So we have
Sit down so everybody in the audience can see.
So we can have our football stadium here, we have our softball and baseball stadium here. This is that building I was talking about, that restroom concession, kind of all multi-purpose building there, so that it can serve not only the football stadium, but the baseball and softball stadium. And then we have a soccer field, and then this dotted here is that practice field that you were referencing. So that is this lower field here, and so that's just more of a graded field, not so much any of the special functionality of any particular sport.
That's a track around the football field too, right?
Yes, sorry, track, and they're kind of shown, but all of the other track and field functions as well.
So right now it's presented as there's no facility, there's no building or facility for field house or storage.
So storage would occur in this building. Field house is this future building here. And that is not included in any of the costs that Rick has presented.
But would have press box, ticket booths.
Right, press box for the football stadium, ticket booth inside this larger building here, along with the restrooms to service all of the fields, concession, and outdoor storage, whether that be, your line markers or your lawnmowers. And I think that building is about 3,500 square feet.
I was going to say a little over 3,000 feet of cumulative buildings in the athletic complex. And based on our budget, by moving the ad alternate dollars from the auxiliary gym over to the play fields, I think we can get pretty much all of those fields in our budget. We'll know more after we get our site work bids in, but I'm feeling pretty good about it based on, our preliminary numbers.
But no press box for soccer, baseball, or softball.
Not in this phase, no, sir. Now, if the bids come in really well, we can add those dollars, because any dollars, I'll remind you folks, any dollars that we are able to save in this project remain with the board. And so, we can add those dollars to the project. So we're working real hard to try to save as many of those dollars as possible.
And that's all lighting requirements, everything for the athletic complex.
Yes,
We
sir.
think we can get into with the ad alternates going to that instead. We think we get it.
That's correct. Yeah, Mr. Lawrence has volunteered moving some lighting and that sort of thing, but the new lighting is so much more energy efficient. It lasts so much longer. We feel it's probably going to be just better to replace that lighting with new fixtures. We're looking at some alternatives on leasing those lights and that sort of thing. There are some possibilities, but we're not quite at that phase yet. We really want to get through the schematic phase. And then, as we move into design development, we're going to start looking at some of those kind of things.
Going back to the floor plan, you had the, according to the color codes here, you had a couple of CTE classrooms in the middle pod, I'll call it. And then, I guess that would have them removed, and you have, from the other CTE classrooms, then you have art and band. Kind of in the CTE wing. Is there any further discussion on alternate plans for that to keep all CTE together like other general education units?
Yes, sir. We spent quite a bit of time looking at that, and Ashley has a slide that she can talk a little bit about that. We'll turn over in just a second. Part of the problem we have is we've got a built-in outside dimension that has to fit all of these classrooms and their sizes. I can't have a 400 square foot classroom here and right next to it have a 800 square foot classroom or a 1200 square foot classroom. The CTE spaces, for the most part, are much larger lab type spaces. And so as you start stacking them together, then you need to have kind of like spaces with that versus having, some smaller spaces kind of fit in. It works to a certain extent, but you'll either get a very inefficient design or it becomes more costly. So when Ashley started laying that out, we looked at laying out those CTE spaces where the art room currently is and then moving art. But it was not a long-term solution. There were some safety issues as well. And Ashley, having said that, I'm going to swap over to this slide that we produced that shows a couple of those options. Okay, Ashley.
You guys can hear me okay with my mask. I'll step to the screen just to, I can point a little bit better. So, this is how we presented it. So this is art here, and then the CTE spaces here. And so I kind of bulleted why we landed there. It wasn't for not trying. We went back and forth of trying to make this work. And so I apologize, it doesn't have the numbers because I actually just kind of pulled the spaces back in because we had so many iterations. I was trying to get something that looked clean for the presentation. But this was pulling the art in here and the business marketing and early childhood here. So two of the big negatives with this is that the square footage isn't the same. So I'm taking these two larger spaces and putting them in a smaller space. So I was basically having to take the storage away from those two spaces, which at least for my meetings with the CTE group, those were needs that those two spaces had. They needed storage. Early childhood needed storage associated with their classroom, and same thing with business marketing. So that storage had to be eliminated to make the swap because, again, the square is a different size than that square. The other thing we were running into, I mentioned in my presentation, was that art really needs that outdoor patio. Sure, the extended instruction area could kind of serve as that, but then I can guarantee you'll be in school for 3 months and there'll be spray paint out in the extended instructional area because that's just what we see outside of every art classroom. And so we tried to keep it on the outside wall. Well, now we're looking at putting a kiln room inside the building, basically. So not on an outside wall. And is it feasible? Sure. Is it good practice? No, because now you're taking a room that needs a very specialized exhaust and you're kind of inboarding that within the school. And so we saw that as a pretty big negative, along with basically taking away space program from the CTE spaces to get them back into that wing. So that's why we presented it in the way we did, was because we felt like those negatives kind of outweighed the desire that they all be in the same wing, but, obviously we're here for feedback and further understanding. So that was why we created this, so you guys could visually see what we saw as we kind of went through the exercise.
I'll have to say Ashley kind of touched on the safety issue. As a general rule, it's got to be an exceptional reason that we don't put a kiln on an exterior wall just because of the exhaust and the safety issue. Those kilns get very hot and accidents do happen. And so we always try to recommend them on an exterior wall. If in fact it was such a critical issue to have those CTE rooms co-joined, I would probably tell you to rethink the schematic. Not just try to shoehorn them in there because you're going to be unhappy with those two spaces moving forward. And so we probably need to go back to the drawing board on how we would deal with that. Which we're happy to do if you so choose, but it will take time, and Ashley works pretty quick, but it would eat up a couple of weeks to get that done, because effectively we would need to kind of rethink how we're doing CTE and the alignment of spaces and kind of redo that.
Sometimes it's a little difficult to understand space, and I assume that all your drawings are kind of to scale per se. Can you provide drawings with measurements, dimensions?
Yeah.
I think I know it would be helpful for me, I think.
And
Yeah.
let me just clarify, because I can provide you something with a lot of dimensions, or are you just looking for more like square footages of space and maybe like the width and the length of?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we're happy to do that. The next phase after the schematics, we're right now at a 16th scale. When we move into design development, we go up to an 1/8 scale, and you actually start seeing dimensions of walls and that sort of thing, where the doors are, where they swing, where receptacles are located. So you get a lot more detail than where we're all right now. Other questions I can answer for you folks? Ashley?
So you have the greenhouse that showed up on the site plan. I know in some of our other discussions that we had, we talked about the fire and safety having outside facilities.
Yeah.
And covered facilities for their, or I'm gonna say enclosed facilities for their learning lab, i.e. the fire truck. Just curious.
We're not showing those quite yet. The greenhouse was such a point of conversation that we actually got the exact dimensions of what would be needed. And so that's honestly why you see that shown, and I apologize for not pointing that out while we were on the site plan. We haven't got.
Show it to them right there, Ashley. It's a lot of little squares. It's just another square.
This is the proposed greenhouse location, and that's based on direct dimensions we got from CTE director. So that we wanted to just make sure it fit, because it was a lot bigger than we were anticipating. And then two, we knew it couldn't go here because then we're blocking the south light, and so where it went. So that was almost an exercise for us as a design team to make sure we had a place for it. So obviously, we don't have the path shown to it, so and we don't have dimensions for the fire truck yet. So again, that's the stuff that starts coming in our next phase. But we very much know that there is the fire lab, and we know we need to provide a cover for it. We know there's going to be other things that are going to come up. We're getting an extensive list from CTE of what equipment, will be needed and dimensions. So as we get further into that conversation, you'll start seeing more of that show up. But the greenhouse was more of just that exercise of, let's see where it goes and if it goes on the site.
One of the things I'll mention about the CTE equipment, the last standalone CTE school that we did, the district got about a $900,000 grant for new equipment. And so once we kind of get this schematic frozen, so to speak, then we would want to help the district start looking for some grant funds for some of this equipment. I really don't want to move a lot of old equipment in a new building. So, but we don't have the budget to go out and buy all new equipment either. So, I think the time would be well spent to try to get that new equipment. Or get the grant, I'm sorry, to purchase new equipment. Maybe we can get some donations as well.
Well, I was looking at too from the importance of if it's kind of like a science lab has to have beakers and Bunsen burners and lab tables, and CTE has to have greenhouses and instructional labs that are outside as well that I feel is part of the classroom, not just extra add-ons.
Well, let me say this. We currently have $750,000 set aside for furnishings for the school. And obviously that's not going to equip a whole new CTE thing and that sort of thing. We are looking at some options on greenhouses and well, and it's not just buying the greenhouse. They're really not that expensive, but putting in all the utilities that are required for that, really, it could be double the actual cost of the greenhouse itself. And so a lot of schools have kind of started looking at other ways that they are doing this, smaller boxes on raised planting beds and things like that. And so I think we should take the time to really explore all of those type of, winter ag kind of ways to do that. And one of the things we want to go do is visit some schools. We're trying to get through, there's a lot of COVID restrictions on visitors and things like that, the schools, non-essential personnel on sites. And hopefully all that will come to an end shortly, and we go out and visit some schools and actually start talking to some folks that have recently built schools and how they're doing it, how they're operating their programs.
One other question, once, I know we discussed the website to go so the public can keep up with what we're doing and even provide content. And I'd like to see an extra step in that is when we have these floor plans out for them to see, is can we have posters that we can put, say, in the library where someone can go view it to understand it. I mean, just looking at it on that big TV is not always easy to comprehend and understand.
Absolutely. We'll get some large foam core boards and we'll make several copies and have it here for the district to distribute as you see. It will also be on the website, and obviously you'll be able to download it or blow those plans up, zoom in as much as you would like to see that. We also have provisions on the website that you will be able to provide feedback. We will get direct feedback from the public. If you folks want to go out, and we're kind of waited for tonight in order to go live with the website. We've had it ready now for a week or so. Dr. Farrell has got a starring role in the video and on the website. So it was a long, hard negotiation with his agent in order to allow him to do that, but they finally acquiesced to terms we could afford. So.
And another point about the website, we do have a section for vendors and bidders that may be interested later in bidding on the project to show their interest now, so that MBCon can start gathering basically a list so that as we move further and RFQs and bid dates start coming out, that list will be provided or be available so that they can be contacted.
And there are also going to be some local jobs on the site that we will be hiring directly. And so we will be advertising for those positions, hopefully in the summer. It's just really a matter of, getting a location out there, getting basic utilities to set up an office and that sort of thing. And that'll come pretty quickly after we have our groundbreaking out there.
So ultimately, what direction are you looking for us tonight?
Well, our biggest issue right now is, I guess we got 3 questions that we'd like for the board. First, we do need a variance from the county. Again, to save some funds, we'd like permission to go to the county and seek those variances. That would be item 1. We've got a schematic plan that allows for future growth. We would like the board's approval to kind of pretty much put that in stone and move on to the next design development phase. Or if the board chooses to send us back to the drawing board, we're happy to do that as well. But we just need some direction there. I do not want to move into design development phase until we pretty much have our schematic plan locked down. So that's that item. And the third thing is, again, we have moved those dollars from those ad alternates from the auxiliary gym over to the athletic fields based on comments that we had. I think the board voted at one point to have those monies against an ad alternate for the auxiliary gym. I think I would need to have approval from the board in order to redirect those funds to the outdoor athletic fields. So whatever the board's pleasure would be on those 3 items will get us working tomorrow.
Well, first I asked if there's any members with any discussion of any of those items before we start taking any action.
When you say written in stone, is it more like ink that we can still white out a little bit, or is it literally stones?
Yeah, we got a little white out, but what I can't do, if we move in design development, we spend 2 or 3 months there and you come back and say, oh, wait a minute, that won't work. We got to start over again. We've wasted 3 months. I would rather take the time now and get it exactly the way you want it before we move into this next phase of design. Time is of the essence, but I'm not going to tell you we can't take another 2 weeks or another week, because we can. But if we lose 2 months, then we're not moving into school in 2023. Just that simple.
Has the high school staff seen this plan and approved it as far as you?
Yeah, well, this is the result of going back to the high school staff the second time.
Right.
And getting their feedback on the initial. So while they have not seen this exactly, these are the corrections that were made or the changes that were made. And there were very, very few to that. The biggest 2 things, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley and Rick, but the biggest 2 things were about athletics and CTE. So. So they've seen, let me make sure I'm clear. They've seen this schematic.
They have seen this.
There could be a little bit of slight variance based on something, yes, but they've seen this, yes.
And then this is generally acceptable to the majority of the high school staff.
Do you think so, Ms. Davis?
Yeah, I sent it out to all the department chairs, and then we had a group meeting with Mr. Ott and Ashley, where they got to put some input in. All the department chairs, I told them they could share with their department. I told them I had the paper plans in my office. Anybody could come by and see them. Several people came by. asked questions, gave input, all that was turned over, which is what's kind of happened. But like I said, there were very few though, schematic. When we met in December, that's where they gave a lot of their opinions and things, and then Ashley and her team, in my opinion, worked wonders to get it all into one thing because, you know, that was amazing to me. So once they saw this, like I said, there were just some small pieces, and I'll, you know, echo what Dr. Farrell said. You know, we had an hour-long meeting with Harnley just looking at athletics things, and then with Miss Overton looking at just CTE things. And those have kind of been the two pieces that I would say there's been a lot of questions or movement or things that have had to happen.
And some significant changes took place in both of those areas after meeting with Mrs. Overton and meeting with Coach Harnley. So really, I think the outliers now are one of the things that Rick said about taking the funding from the auxiliary gym for the outside fields. That was definitely a priority of Harnley. And then the only thing that is still for a decision where CTE is concerned on the floor plan is whether or not those two rooms stay there or if it's flip-flopped with art.
And I'll just add a little to that, since those were our two longest meetings. In CTE, we did end up adding an additional classroom and an additional welding lab.
Yep.
So there were some that we definitely were able to incorporate, and some that we made efforts to incorporate, and then you know, presented kind of our design opinion on why we landed where we did.
Looking back at notes from the meetings that were had, the early college staff talked about the extending learning area as being noted in their scheme. But I don't ever remember hearing it talked about amongst the traditional high schools should be in the upper and the middle part of those extended learning areas. And my question is, as an evaluation of, and kind of going back to asking the schematics of measurements, is that space, if it's not going to be utilized today or in the near future as extended learning areas, converted over to actual classroom space so that we do have room already for any ADM growth, that we don't have to bring mobile units in to get started, because that's the situation we've been in for the last 20 years as students have been living in mobile units and learning because we didn't have space. That could also be utilized before that time if an extended learning area is needed. A mouthful, but did you get it all?
I think I understand where you're headed with that, but I will tell you, I bet from day one, those are going to be the most heavily used spaces in this school. Those spaces really have I've been involved in educational reform for a long time. I served on Ronald Reagan's Nation at Risk program, served on 3 different states in the Southeast that, North Carolina at risk, me and 599 other people in the state, along with South Carolina and Georgia in similar kind of programs. Those were back in the 80s. And one of the things I'll tell you in all my years involved in educational reform, the one thing that has made the most difference is going to a design-based or project-based learning model. It has changed the way students learn. It changes their attitude about coming to school. It is just a new paradigm in learning. And some of that has been because of technology has been able. But those spaces you can allow for seminars, you can have large groups in there. You can spread out and have projects that you cannot do in a classroom with furniture. And I think once your folks really get in there and just see what can be done in those spaces, it's going to be a huge advantage to the students going forward. Part of what we want to do is kind of push that outside as well. So in the months where the weather is good, you can get outside and extend those programs out there. We want to do that as well. So, but to answer your specific question, can it be utilized for classrooms? The answer is yes. Now, do you want to put walls in there? The answer is probably no, because of the access codes and that sort of thing. We'd have to provide for corridors, but it can certainly be used for instructional space. And we anticipate it being used for instructional space. And if we had a bigger budget, I would want to make those spaces even larger. So,
So if I'm a teacher in that corridor and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 classrooms directly that enter and exit through that corridor, that space is big enough for 2 classes to come together?
it is. That
So,
we anticipate that we'll have some large TV monitors and that sort of thing. So if you wanted to have 2 classes out there, built a high school down in Georgia that was designed completely around project-based learning. And we thought a lot of the projects would actually take place in the Extended Learning Center. But after 3 years, and I went back on a frequent basis to talk to the teachers, how they were using these spaces, administrators, and that sort of thing. And one of the things that we found is that a lot of the instruction, where you might have 2 groups coming out for an English class or a math class or a social studies class, you were bringing those folks out kind of a lecture type situation. And a lot of the projects were going on in the classrooms. And because of the way you'll see as we start building out the design, that you can supervise the classroom spaces and the extended learning spaces very easily because of the access and the doors and that sort of thing. Again, that's one of the things that I want to take some of the folks from the school district to go see some of these schools, and then pick out 1 or 2 that maybe will become a buddy school, and then maybe take some teachers or department heads, let them go have some peer-to-peer type conversations, maybe over a period of a day or so, and really see how these buildings are being utilized. But it is really a tremendous asset to educators.
so of those 8 classrooms, how did the other 6 deal with if you've got people moving that much and activity going on, there's noise along with it?
Some. I can tell you that what we've seen, and, as a facility planner, when I look at things like that, I go back. I don't just build it or design it or program it. I go back and see how educators are using these spaces. And that was one of my concerns as well about, well, what about some noisy activities and that sort of thing going on out there? Students, they don't care. Whatever activity is going over here, if they're engaged in the work, they're engaged in the work. They're not worried about what's going on over here. And if you think about any college class, if you think about anybody that's going into the workforce, if you look at a large manufacturing facility, it's a big open plant, and you got folks that are focused on their work here and 10 other different activities going on out there. And, we just have not seen the issues. Now, we will be doing some things that will have some noise attenuation. Obviously, the classrooms adjacent to that will be providing some soundproofing on the inside and that sort of thing. But as with the few classrooms that we have around us, I just don't think that will become a problem. I will say, in absence of having those, it pretty much eliminates your ability to provide project-based or design-based curriculum or learning in the future in the school. Now, if we build them, you don't have to use them. But if we don't build them, then you'll never get to use them. And you pretty much kind of eliminated the district's ability to participate in design-based or project-based learning. Because you just don't have the spaces otherwise in the school to do that. We haven't built
Valid
a,
argument.
sir?
I said valid argument, but argument to your point too also, if we build it and then don't use it, it's wasted. And I don't think either one of us can answer that question.
I'll go so far as to say, Mr. Chairman, if you don't use it, I'll refund your money back for those extended.
Will you
You
put that
will
in
be using
stone?
those spaces.
Will you put that in stone?
Yes, sir, I will, because I can promise you, we haven't built a high school in the last 10 years that we haven't, middle schools and even elementary schools, that we've not provided these collaborative spaces in for students and teachers. It just, I can't imagine building a new school with not having those kind of collaborative spaces, because that's where learning's going. I mean, it just, it is. I mean, I can build you a 1950s model and a 1970s model, but that's not what the colleges are training teachers for. You know, project-based, design-based learning is a big part of where new teachers are coming out. And so I would really hate to restrict the district going forward for the next 50 or 60 years in how you teach in that school. And that's one of the things that we heard loud and clear when we started the programming, is we want to build a school for the future. We do not want to build a facility that's going to tie our hands in 30 years. And so that's what we're trying to do, is provide that flexibility for you. And it's really at minimal cost. I will give you an example of that. If you look at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction standards, their guidelines to architects is to allow for a 37% grossing factor. Grossing factor is unused space. It's, net space is inside this walls. And then you take all those net spaces, and you add them up, you multiply it by 1.37, and that's the overall square footage. What I gave Ashley to work with was a 25% grossing factor. So building classrooms around these extended learning areas are more efficient, and they're cheaper to operate because you can supervise them. I don't have to build a lot of long, skinny corridors that only have one sole use, and that's moving people up and down the hall. This is circulation and instruction. So even if we didn't have them, I would still have to build corridors in there that I could only have a corridor, and we couldn't have learning going on in that space. So we're actually, killing two birds with one stone, so to speak, in there, and making it functional space rather than just circulation space. Kind of like a food court in the mall is, I guess, a good example.
Well, I'll throw out my stance right now is on the schematic and plan. I'm not ready to commit anything. I'd like to have more time to digest this right now. So I think we should take it in three different motions, and movements. The variance is one, what we want to do with the design plan, and the part of redirecting the add-on from the auxiliary gym to the athletic complex. Now open the floor for any other discussion.
We're going to have discussion on each motion.
Yes.
Or do you want to have discussion now for all?
We can have discussion on each motion if somebody wants to make a motion, or if they want to have a discussion about any of the three options before we have a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion on the ball field. I think I already know that's unanimous with all of us, to reallocate the aux gym funds to the ball field.
All right, so we have a motion from Mr. Heath to redirect the funds from the auxiliary gym to the athletic complex.
Second.
seconded by Dr. Banks. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I'll make a motion to direct MB Con or Mosley, whoever needs to do it, to seek a variance from the county for the parking requirement.
Motion from Mr. Purcell for MB Con or Mosley Architects to work with and contact the county for a variance from their UDO for parking. Seconded by Ms. Idlet. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I will throw out too, I mean, we can call another meeting if we want to have another meeting in 2 weeks. We'll be having another meeting in a week. I mean, I know time is of the essence for sure, but we're not 6 months down the road before we're gonna meet again.
My discussion would be, I'm pretty good with the schematic as it is, but I'd like for us all to be on the same page. So my question to you, I think, if anybody else feels the same way, is what would make you feel more comfortable with the schematic to get to a vote? What needs to happen, or what are the uncertainties?
I would like to see some measurements and also just the opportunity to digest all this information tonight. To me, it's a very important project, and I mean, am I saying scrap the whole thing? Heck no, it's, I mean, I think we're going down the right road. Me personally, I'm just not ready to say I like everything I see. There's some things I had questions about. They were addressed tonight, and do appreciate that, but I would still like time to digest. And
Yeah, earlier I asked you about the high school, I assume the early college too, they're happy with their area.
Yes, they've had an opportunity to take a look at it as well.
Mr. Dennis, could you
Yeah.
answer, if you know some general, give me a general idea of how large the extended learning areas are? I mean, if you could kind of demonstrate or.
This is off the top of my head, so I apologize.
Yeah.
I want to say that they are around 1,600 square feet. Does that feel about right, Rick? Yeah, 14 to
Could you kind of
16.
give us an idea as far as what we might look at?
You made me do math in public for them. Is there a math teacher here?
You went to state.
I mean, looking at it, it looks maybe twice, a little over twice the size of the hallway.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the classrooms themselves are 750, so it's basically 2 classrooms, and the classrooms can accommodate 30 students easily. So, I really wish somebody had a calculator, because it's what that about
We all
here.
have a
About here,
calculator.
okay, this is 40, so divides 1,400 by 40, and then I'll tell you how far over.
There's a human calculator.
35.
Okay, so
That's a
Yeah, it's about-
architect trick by
I know,
the county.
they're 2 feet wide. So, I mean, basically, like, to the second stack is about how big the space is. Now, I'm doing a square here, they're more rectangular, but,
She's probably a state graduate, you know, they move their lips when they're counting.
I know, I was moving them too, because I would have lost track.
There are a lot of state graduates.
Yeah,
in
well,
this
I know,
Yeah.
it's okay, but they were all doing it too. They were keeping count with me.
So Amber, how do you feel about that space?
The extended instruction space. Well, first off, let me say, I haven't heard any feedback directed to me from my staff. So I don't want to speak for them at all, because no one has said anything to me about that, just to let you know, whatever that means. I'm with that.
None at all, not for, not against.
No, I have heard nothing. So that's all I can say as far as the staff. Nobody has said anything either way about that to me. Well, I think they're said around me, sometimes not to me, but to me, it hasn't been said. If you come in here any day on a non-COVID year, our hallways are packed with kids. There's kids everywhere, and I think anybody who's been in the high school can attest to that kids don't just stay in the classrooms, for whatever reason that may be. So in light of that, I do see value in those kinds of areas being used. I will admit, it's hard because I've always been here, so this is what I know. So it's hard to imagine. So, I think I kind of get what Mr. Overton is saying. It's hard to kind of see those spaces sometimes being utilized and other things, because we tend to think in terms of classrooms and what we can actually do with them and who we can put in them. But like I said, teachers are always looking for spaces to put kids and have kids work and group and do things like that. So do I think they will be used with 100%? Yes, I do believe they will be used. And that's about as much as I can say on it. Is it more valuable than a classroom? I don't know. All I can say is I do believe they will be used.
I do think also that, and I talked about this with someone, but I'm not sure who, maybe it was Rick. There's going to be opportunity for professional development with some of that as teachers move into that that way of teaching more. So I don't think it's going to, some of it's going to happen naturally, but if you keep those spaces, there's going to have to be some support for teachers too in dealing or learning to best utilize that space.
And I will add to what Amber said. I have not really gotten any feedback from any of our meetings either, but I believe what my takeaway was, the staff was looking to see the space develop more so they could understand it a little bit better. And we talked about, we'll be adding casework, we'll be adding sinks, we'll be adding, we'll plop the camera in there so you can see the 3D space, because sometimes it's just so hard to say, here's a rectangle, here, how will you use it, right? I just told you that is the right amount of square footage, but if you can't really picture yourself in it, I think that was my takeaway, was that we need to show them the space.
It's not going to just basically be a front hall, just wide open, nothing, just they can go plop down on the floor. It's going to have some items and instructional aids built in.
Oh, the intent is to have modular furniture in there, some soft seating, that sort of thing, things that a teacher could go and arrange. There may be some partitions that you put in there. I will tell you, my daughter is a principal of a school that is completely open, and they have pretty much set up all classrooms with modular furniture. And, they're limited on space. They have a waiting list that's about a year long to get into this facility because of it. And it's just such a collaborative learning environment that, parents come in, they want to be a part of it. And I know that's hard, coming from a very old high school, with a design around what we refer to as a teacher in a box. All of a sudden now allow that teacher outside of the box and the students outside of the box, and have room to provide projects that may be there for all semester. You may have physics experiments going on out there that you kind of got positioned off. We're talking about putting sinks in that area so you can wash up. You may have, dance clubs. You may have club meetings in there, seminar meetings. We've seen some high schools that have phased in, and in order to save money, they paired up some of the instructors with larger groups of students, and then projects going on in other areas. They will be highly used. I agree 100% with Dr. Farrell. I think exposing your current high school instructors to how those spaces can be used and how other districts have used them would be a small amount of money very well spent. But again, and I want to go back to Mr. Overton's point. I want this board to be comfortable on these schematics, because once you tell me, okay, we're satisfied, we're moving, and I don't want to have to back up. And so if you folks need to take another week or week and a half to let me get you comfortable with the schematics, I would rather you do that than me go in and start off in design development, not knowing that you're comfortable. And if you want me to go back and look at doing some more schematic plans, I will do that. I would rather take the time to do it what you want, because you're going to live at this school for the next 75 years, maybe longer. But keep in mind, if we want to get in 2023, we do need to move forward as quickly as we can. If we can't get into 2023, I'm just as happy to open 2024. So I want you folks to be comfortable. And if you want us to come back in 2 weeks for a special call meeting and spend some more time, maybe blow it up a little bit bigger than just doing it on TV, we're happy to do that as well. I would not want to push it out any longer than 2 weeks. And, you know, because I'm already up against the wall on schedule.
Yeah, I want to stay on track for 2023 myself.
Sorry?
I said, I want to stay on track for 2023 myself, so I don't want to delay you. I'm like Jason, I'm fine with it, but if Christian wants another week, then that's fine with me too, as long as, you know, it isn't going to delay the project. So.
Can we get the general dimensions pretty fast?
I don't want to promise tomorrow.
No, sorry, I didn't put a time frame.
We make clear what we're wanting to be sent and brought back so that we're not, they send something and, oh, well, that opens another box and another box. And I mean, you know, I want them to have clear direction on what we're going to ask them to submit back to us.
I'm fine with it like it is.
I am as well, but
I don't have any, it's not for
again,
me.
it's $45 million of
Right.
our and this county's money and the taxpayers. I say our because we're all taxpayers, but I want to make sure everybody's on board and it's what, you know, we think needs to happen.
Right. I don't have an ask. There's nothing. I think whatever y'all have.
I'm fine as is, but the chair wants some
Right.
information, and we definitely let him get some information.
What if we get it and then discuss it next week at our meeting?
Yeah, but he was saying, what do we want to see? So I guess. It's
Yeah,
whatever
that's what,
Christian
you know,
wants.
if we're going to do that, I just want to make sure that they know what we want to see, so we're not doing this again next week and, you know.
Unless you have anything, do you have anything you want to see, Sissy? This is what Christian wants to see.
Yeah, some good measurements. And y'all been available to answer questions all along, so we can put it on the agenda for next Thursday.
Yes, if I may just remind you all, I know we've talked about a lot. You will have to make a decision about the two options that Ashley shared about the location of the CTE classrooms and the art classroom. That's still it's just a topic that has come up several times. So that will have to be made. And I guess Rick had mentioned that there could potentially be some other options, but if so, then that would be one of the things, as Mr. Purcell mentioned, that they would need to bring to you.
Well, right now, we have functional spaces. If we go to the option that Ashley showed you, we're going to build you 3 spaces that will not be functional. In my opinion, they will not be adequate and you won't be happy. So if it's important and if it's a priority to get all those spaces co-joined, then I would prefer to go back and redraw the CTE and some of the other spaces and come back to you with a different plan. Because I really don't want to build something that you're going to be unhappy with. And I just think you will be unhappy. There's some safety issues with that. And I'd rather rethink that altogether. And if you want us to bring some options back, next week, we're happy to do that and see if you like it better. I just know based on my experience, and I don't want to speak for Ashley, but I just don't think you'll be happy with that, the other option that she showed you. And we're happy to do that. I think we're on what, option 28?
Stop numbering.
I think we're on option 7 for the site plan. So, and it's important to me. I've told Dr. Farrell time and time again, I want to get this right. I want to get this right.
I agree, and we've been many, many years getting to this point, and I don't want to fast track something now that we regret. Look at all options and let's, like you said, let's get the project that's best, not just fast track something through, so.
So dimensions of those 3 spaces. we're talking
Dimensions of
about flip-flopping,
spaces.
Dimensions of the extended learning areas.
Yep.
And maybe, can you drop a couple of boxes in there to show what it would look like if you change those 2 classrooms? The extended learning areas, if you put classrooms in quarters?
You want to answer that?
I
You can't do that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of egress codes and things like that. We can make those spaces open spaces for instructional purposes, but I cannot go in there and put boxes in them. I can put modular furniture in there so you can have different programs going on, but we can't go in and build classrooms inside that space. If you do not want the extended learning areas, what we need to do is compact that to an 8-foot corridor and then add a couple more classrooms out on the end. Frankly, I don't think you need more classrooms at this point in time. And that's the reason that it was programmed around a specific number of classrooms and then giving you these flexible areas to have various kinds of programs. And building more classrooms and taking away the space, we're happy to do it. And I think I mentioned earlier, we're over about 1,000, a little over 1,000 square feet. And if we can save some square footage, we're happy to do it. I'm very reluctant to grow even more square footage though, because we've already got a little bit of a budget issue in the square footage.
And I'm fine with spaces the way they are. I just want to make sure, like, that's what I'm saying is every option we want you to bring back. So when you come back, we should be able to make the decision, not, oh, well, we forgot about this. Can you bring that back to us again so that we can get it all? If you can't drop boxes, and I'm not an architect, that's why I'm asking, then can you bring us something where you show that condensed to the 8-foot and 2 more classes or however many more classes you would need to add?
I can show you a plan with those eliminated. Happy to do it if that's what you want.
It's worth seeing.
Yeah, I mean, is that kind of what you were looking to see what it would look like if we got rid of the open space and made a classroom, usable classroom? Okay, yeah.
I can tell you, walk right out of this hall, the door right here, and look down that hall. That's what it'll look like. But we're happy to do it. And, it will save some space, but we're happy to do that. And if there are any other things that you want us to look at, I'd like to know it tonight so we can go ahead and prepare those options. So if at all possible to make a decision when we come back, together again, I really would like to do that. I will say, this is a deviation from the program that the board originally approved. And one of the reasons it is because of the CTE program. We pretty much pull all that space out of we only started under the program with 2 learning centers. One was a STEAM-based learning center, and then the other were general classroom type spaces. And so we pulled that out in order to, it changed the program. And, so this, I think if we want to modify that, we're probably going to end up having to go back to just the 2 learning centers as an option. And Ashley and I have talked about that. But again, going back to this option that, she showed that's been discussed, you will not be happy with that. Your art teacher is not going to be happy. The folks that you put in those other 2 classrooms are not going to be happy because they're not going to have the associated storage with it. And so, in my opinion, just because you have spaces next to somebody else, it's just not going to be a very functional space. And so if it's important to have those spaces co-joined, then we need to redraw that. And maybe you would like us to do that and bring that back as an option to think about. Happy to do it.
Could I ask one more thing of Ms. Davis and Ms. Stevens maybe? Is I was a little
Oh, I'm
surprised
sorry.
of Ms. Davis and Ms. Stevens. I was a little surprised you had not had any feedback as far as the extended learning centers. Is it possible to poll your staff? Not really poll them, but just ask one simple question. How would you use the extended learning center? And get that back to us before our next board meeting? Maybe compile just a list of responses.
Yes, sir.
That make anybody feel better?
Before when are y'all meeting again?
Next Thursday.
18.
Yep, got
Thank you.
We love you.
We rearranged the JV football game for that night since that's now going to be the first one and I'm going to have to miss it for this.
I know. Turn your Facebook on, you can.
It's going to happen.
I missed my son's game winning home
All right, so
run in overtime.
we're gonna discuss and hopefully vote next Thursday.
Yes. I mean, that's my understanding, that's the pleasure of the board member.
Yep, sounds good to me.
So much for the weekend.
Hopefully nobody on my team is watching
So just to be clear, you want to see an option without the extended learning centers. Is there any other things that you want to see? I know you want to see dimensions, which we will get to you hopefully soon. Ashley will be here tonight, and so they'll be working on it tomorrow, probably first of the week. Is there anything else you would like for us to do to bring back to you or provide to you prior to that meeting on the 18th?
I don't think so. Was it the flop? What was the other one you mentioned? Is it flipping the rooms?
You talking about the art and the 2 CTE
It
class?
weren't the art and the CTE. You were gonna, or
Okay, well,
there was some other option than that, is that correct?
Well, this is what would happen if you just swapped spaces. Which, again, Ashley, I've volunteered up my opinion. You may have a different one. Dr. Farrell may have too. I would, before you even consider that swap, I'd rather provide a different plan for you to look at. Because it just won't be functional and the folks you put in those classrooms will not be happy.
Yeah, if there's a directive or a desire that the light purple needs to be together, and that's what we need to hear, then we would rather show you some other option than we shoved it in the square footage that the art room was in.
And the 2 programs that they pulled out probably make the most sense out of CTE to kind of locate with a more academic side than the CTE side. I don't have any issue with
Yeah, I feel
the
the
plot,
same way.
the way that's laid out. I mean, if you got to pull something out, the 2 they chose that would make the most sense are the ones that kind of fit on that side anyway. Because if you have to go back and do a new design, you're talking about having to go back now to the 2 pods versus this 3 system that we have.
Correct.
Which is not just changing the wing, that's basically reworking this whole thing back around again.
The problem is we're confined by the site.
Right.
And once you know what your outer exterior can be, I can't keep pushing, adding on to that other, then it makes no sense to have two small learning centers, so I need to consolidate that. So then you're back to two. The CTE space that's there now, I'm gonna have to relocate because I can't just keep going out because you won't have an outdoor lab for some of your activities. That's important, is having this space inside. And so we really kind of need to go back to some modification of the original program and put those spaces there. Which we can do, and happy to do it. We kind of thought a little bit about it. It would basically, for just purposes of talking, just so we can help get some direction. We would effectively consolidate the general classrooms in the upper wing to the lower wing. Ashley, you want to go show that?
So this is our thoughts. Rick and I discussed this afternoon. Was take basically all of what you see in yellow and make a wing here that incorporates those. Then take the light purple, the CTE spaces, along with the sciences, and incorporate those into this upper wing, so that this really is just these two spaces. And we would probably change that a little bit, maybe not have the hallway there. But that's kind of our very brief discussion of how we think that might look or work. Again, I kind of said, like, it sounds easy, and it's, we got to make sure the pieces really fit and that they are the same size and that they lay out correctly. But that was our first conversation about it was, is there another way to skin the proverbial cat of trying to get all of the CTE together and all of the general classrooms together?
Seems like with that you would lose some outdoor space.
Well, again, that's
They're always
it
compromises.
always sounds good, and it always seems like if I can do this, it's gonna work, but we really need to, if that's something that you as the board want to see, is all those light purple spaces, the CTE spaces together, then we really need to try to look at that upper portion of classroom spaces differently.
So in essence, if you did that, the spaces currently marked future classrooms would become present
Correct.
in a lot of ways.
Right.
And the light purple now that is that CTE wing would become the future classrooms. I got you.
But it's a lot of work, and we're happy to do it. But what I don't want to do is wait till next week, and then we come in and say, okay, let's go back and have this other option. I'd rather go ahead and be working on that, then if that's what y'all would like to see. But that, in my opinion, is going to be the only way to solve the issue of getting those other two CTE-related spaces co-joined. That was a very good point. We did pull out the two that had the least, affinity to welding and carpentry and agriculture. Those kind of spaces really are different kind of spaces. It's a different kind of environment than being co-joined to a food lab. And so that's what made the most sense. And in our meetings, we heard from the CTE director, and I think that's correct, that wasn't the highest priority for her. And so as we looked at trying to solve that problem, we kept that in mind, that it wasn't her highest priority. However, if it is now somehow become a priority, we'll try to accommodate. I just don't want to accommodate it in such a way I'm going to build 3 spaces that you won't be happy with. That's what I'm trying to get to.
I don't need to see that realigned, but if we
Like
want
I
him
said,
to
I
do it,
like-
I'd say if we want him to do it, maybe somebody needs to tell him, have him do it now, so when they come back, we're ready, but. Fairly good compromise. Flipping two classes to have to redesign an entire layout is kind of, doesn't make a lot of sense. But if we wanted to bring it back, something, bring it back now.
Well, we kind of already seen this things too. I say bring back what we requested.
Okay. We will get that out, and, matter of fact, we'll try to get it to you in advance of the meeting, so you'll have some time to actually look at it. And, so when we come back, maybe you'll have your questions prepared. Feel free to contact myself or Ashley if you have any questions before then. And otherwise, we'll see you on the 18th.
All right, thank you.
Anything else for us, folks?
No,
I didn't want you to think I was excusing myself.
no, you're fine. You're fine. It's late.
Y'all have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you too.
Ms. Lane to discuss the draft 2021 and 22 school year calendars.
I handed out to you tonight 2 additional sheets. One of them is a correction to the early college calendar. There was something I had left off of it, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. If you can't figure it out, then we'll just leave it at that. And then I also, on the other sheet that has the facts and figures on there, I added the hours of instruction for the early college, which I did not put on the one that was sent to you in your board packet. And then the December end of semester early start calendar. So what you have now are 4 calendars to look at. One is a traditional calendar. One is an early start calendar where we begin on the 23rd of August. Another early start calendar where we start on August the 16th, but that would be pending legislation coming from Raleigh. So we don't know if we're going to even be allowed to do that or not. If we could, that would be the ideal calendar because that would give us 86 days in the first semester and 93 days in the second semester, and that's a whole lot more even. In talking with high school teachers and talking with Mr. Mazzell regarding middle school teachers, there was no pushback for having the shorter first semester and ending in December. So they were very much in favor of that. Also, for parent input, we put a Google survey out, and as of 7:30 tonight, we've had 210 responses, 180 responses for the ending of the semester at December, and 30 for the traditional calendar. So overwhelmingly, the parents that have responded want that December end. I think it gives, what it does is it gives everybody a clean break. Oftentimes when you have kids, especially high school kids, you send them home for the Christmas break, they've got the pressure hanging over them, teachers are still trying to get stuff together. They come back for a week and try to prepare for an exam, and then they take an exam. It makes a lot more sense to go ahead and close the semester in one fell swoop rather than trying to break that little piece off and come back. And the calendar committee worked very hard to come up with these calendars. So I think they deserve a tremendous amount of credit because they worked endlessly trying to negotiate holidays and teacher work days and so forth. And I'm not going to go over all of the different equations that I came up with for the number of hours, except to say this. The December end of semester calendar has 174 days of instruction, and you end up with 1,045 instruction hours. Now, the state requires 1,025, so we're only 20 hours to play with there, which is cutting it very close. All right, the traditional calendar, you end up with 1,057 instructional hours, which gives you a little more room to play with. But if you look at the early college calendar, they end up with 1,076 hours. And that's because April Jackson designed this calendar. And I'm telling you, that woman is relentless for getting instructional hours in. So she and her school has approved it, but she worked very hard to get as many instructional hours in as she possibly could. If we could go with the December end of calendar, end of semester calendar with the early start, we will end up with 1,076 hours. So if there's any way that the legislators will let us have that 5 days and start on August the 16th, it would be a tremendous help as far as having more instructional hours for our kids. But if not, then it looks like the 1,045 hours is the calendar that everyone seems to be the happiest with. Are there any questions?
The poll was a sense of fairness, and I responded, but they were given the one with just the 23rd,
Yes.
not the one with the 16th.
Right,
Okay.
because that's not
Right, we
even-
can't do it unless they change the legislation.
Correct.
But, okay.
I think our only real hope of that is whatever happens with the, what is it, House Bill 82 for
Yes,
summer school.
Summer school.
If they give us some flexibility with that, and that's a huge if they give us some flexibility with that and say you have to meet 150 hours, something like that we would do in summer school rather than 6 weeks, 5 days a week. If they said you have to meet it by, say, the end of next school year, then we could potentially come back on the 16th, if that would be allowed, and recoup or go ahead and get some of those hours then.
We would be able to recover 30 hours that week,
Yes.
and that would be a lot of instruction. And it would allow us to have a little bit longer summer for the kids and the teachers.
But that's just a huge unknown right now where the summer school bill is concerned. So, but we thought it was important to have it
Yes,
because we believe it's the best calendar.
yes,
But right now, the 23rd start is the best we can do
yes,
legally.
yes. And in another word, to let you all know, surrounding counties, Pasquotank has the December end of semester, and Paquemmons County does the December end of semester.
And I think Currituck might be moving that way.
They are? Okay. So we've got a lot of districts around us that are doing it, and I think that, I really do think it is the best way to handle it.
It's been popular in the districts that did it.
Yes.
So,
According to Paquemmons, they had zero pushback from parents.
So, Will, I have a question, because I know the board needs a recommendation from me on this. I want to recommend that we accept the early college calendar as presented, that we, or that they approve the early semester start, the one that shows us starting on August 23rd. But I also want to say, but if the 16th becomes a possibility, we could move to that one instead of the 23rd. Is there a way to do that, or would I need to bring that back for a different vote? And how will that impact?
You could make it like,
Power School?
sorry.
And how would that impact Power School?
Well, the calendar has to go on the table for 30 days, so we don't make a decision right now
Okay,
as far as voting on it is concerned. But how can we recommend a 23rd start date with a backup of the 16th start date?
If that
If
becomes available?
legislation allows it.
Is it the board's pleasure that if the earlier start date was allowed, that be the start date?
That would put all of our other schools starting at the same time as the early college.
Right.
Because I mean, the motion could be, so the two start dates is the 23rd
And 16th.
and 16th. It could be a motion. We approve the start date of the 23rd unless legislation is passed allowing the 16th. And then we approve that replacing the 23rd as the start date. It's kind of a little mumbo jumbo-ish, but I think it would do the trick. And then if legislation wasn't passed, then you.
We're already
you
set with the
the motion
23rd.
is approving the 23rd. But really, the only way of doing that is if it is the board's desire to have the 16th.
The 16th,
be
right.
the earlier start date. If not, you're getting into a lot of different actions and a motion.
So if it's not the board's pleasure to start on the 16th, if that becomes an option, then the motion just becomes for the 23rd start.
my understanding is correct, though, the motion for tonight is that it goes on the table for 30 days, correct?
Correct, but say, because what is the
Yeah.
latest
Yeah.
we have to have the calendar decided on? So
The April board meetings when we usually decide.
the motion being you're gonna have the 30 days, you can't, if legislation's passed between now and April, you can't then at the April meeting.
We'd have to table it again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But surely if they offer that legislation, I mean, there's gotta be a way to change that without.
you would think so, but it wouldn't be the first time.
Well, aren't we actually tabling all of the calendars presented to us tonight and not
Yes,
certain ones? So
yes.
at the end of, or come our April meeting, the recommendation could be calendar A and calendar for the early college and calendar for traditional school. We're
Yeah, each-
tabling to review all of the calendars that has been presented to us tonight.
Each time
Not
you
to
do
make a
approve
decision
the
of
early
which
college
ones to
and
use.
the traditional calendar, or whatever you want to adopt as the traditional calendar. So you always approve two.
Correct.
But-
So we can table them all tonight then?
Yes, all of them should be tabled tonight.
So then tonight, all we need is a motion to table all the calendars you presented. And hopefully by the April meeting, we'll have guidance from the state and we can act on one of those calendars.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion, if that's what I think that's what we're saying.
I think that's my
Motion by Mr.
recommendation as
Purcell.
well.
Sorry, that's my motion if that's the superintendent's recommendation.
Yes.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Purcell to accept the superintendent's recommendation to table the calendar presented for the 2021-22 school year as presented by Ms. Lane this evening. Seconded by Dr. Banks. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. You have another item, Ms. Lane?
I have the next item is
Scribbling or
the
something?
Scribbles contract. Scribbles, we already have something with Scribbles. We have something called Scribble Order. And that company provides us a service so that our former students and our current seniors can request transcripts online. And that company will then send the transcript to the college that the student designates. And the beauty of it is the student and then us, the school district, gets an email back when that college receives it. I can't tell you the number of times in the past when I was a principal that we would get repeat letters requesting transcripts because they claimed they never got them. This is one of the beauties of it is that it's a guarantee. They show us that they got the transcript. So we already have that piece of Scribbles. And also it makes us money because they charge a fee. We add a little bit to it. And then every time a transcript is ordered online, then that money's collected. Now, for current seniors, we set it up for X number of free transcripts so that they're applying to several colleges, they get X number of free transcripts. And then once they graduate, then they fall into the same pattern that former students do, and everybody pays for the transcript. Okay, the part that we're looking at tonight, however, is called Scrib and Roll. And this is a 100% online enrollment opportunity. The applications are completed by parents via smartphone, tablet, or a computer. The initial registration and annual re-enrollment is done every single year by Scrib and Roll. They roll the re-enrollment over and they do the initial enrollment for example, with kindergarten and any new students that come to the county. Their implementation process takes weeks, not months. They have over 100 languages that they support. It is fully compatible with PowerSchool, and Scribbles partners with NCDPI. So it is a company that NCDPI recognizes as one of the ones that can get into PowerSchool and get the information that is needed. It shares specific information. Once the enrollment is made, specific information is shared with the appropriate person. For example, if we have a child that enrolls McKinney-Vento, that information would come directly to me then, because I'm the McKinney-Vento person. And I would know then that that child has enrolled at such school under the McKinney-Vento Act. So we would be able to track then, as the enrollments go on, what we've got coming into our schools. It would also, I think, help lighten the load for data managers, because they spend a lot of time making appointments and having parents come in and making copies of driver's license and bills and that sort of thing. Parents upload all of that to it. So it cuts out a lot of additional work for the data managers. As far as cost is concerned, there is a $4,000 initial setup fee. That's for whatever year we decide. If we start it next year, it'll be $4,000 to set it up. And then it's $300 a month. Every year thereafter, it is $2,500 a year and $300 a month. Now, Scribbles offers a lot of different services. But another thing that they do is they can archive all of our students' records. And essentially, and Amy, I want you to make sure I'm explaining this correctly. If we were to start this with this kindergarten class, by the time they graduate, everything would be paperless. All of their records would be in the cloud. Everything would be in the cloud. And that would be a tremendous, I think, not only savings, but a manpower savings, because it's a matter of going to Power School, pulling it down, and you have it right there in front of you. I'm old, and there's a part of me that scares because I am old. I like paper and pencil. But everything that I have heard about this is the way that we need to go. So my thought is that we need to look at possibly at least getting Scrib and Roll this year. So for the first year, it's going to cost us $6,500.
So you're requesting just Scrib and Roll this year?
Yes, sir. Is that correct, Amy?
Yes, because we already have Scrib Order.
Yeah.
Scrib Order is free. We actually make money off of it. And with Scrib and Roll, we also get what's called Scrib Transfer. So different counties around us, like Pasquotank, Currituck, they all have Scribbles. And what they do is when they have a student that's transferring to our school district, then all we have to do is they send us a request in Scribbles, and Scrib Transfer is free, and we would just transfer their records through Scribbles over to the next school, and they would have it.
If I go online and I want to enroll my upcoming kindergartner, I know you said the data managers right now, they've got to make copies and scan everything. Does this still send them, who verifies the authenticity of documents to make sure that we're not having students from Pasquotank? Or there's still data managers, somebody still gets a review process?
Yes.
Somebody in our district, not
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so each data manager will have access to their particular school. It will send them an email when a student has been enrolled on Scrib and Roll, and it will send them an alert. And the good thing about Scrib and Roll is that, so like now, if a parent comes and they say, well, I don't have my 2 bills, and we say, well, you need 2 bills so we can show you proof. If you enroll on Scrib and Roll, instead of us calling that parent, Scrib and Roll will email that parent and contact that parent every single night until they upload the document that they're supposed to. And then you're eliminating us calling,
Right.
And pestering them and telling them, you got to have this or you can enroll. That would take care of it for us.
I just want to make sure somebody local
Yes.
can verify authenticity to make sure
Yes.
we're not
You
getting
would still
kids
have
from.
to verify, a few things in there. But the good thing about this is that it would automatically take the information and put it into Power School. We would just have to put the student's Power School ID in, and then it would bring all the students' information that the parents had put in. And also with that, every year we would send out, and every school does it, an updated information sheet. So we can put all that information on our Scrib and Roll page.
And when a parent, updates it, at the beginning of the year, all that information gets automatically put into Power School, so it's automatically updated. They have phone number change, or, if they have to change an emergency contact,
Right.
that information will be uploaded in there.
So I don't have to fill out 12 different forms for each school my kid's in.
And the other thing that's good, with that is like, you have to sign that, I don't want my, somebody don't want their child's picture taken. So we could put the form on that right there, and then it would, make a spreadsheet, and then you could, give it to your librarian or, the classroom, so that they would know that that child can't have the picture taken. But it kind of eliminates all the paper, paper trail, and you got this stack of papers here and that paper, it kind of all puts it in there together.
I'm serious, that in itself is enough for me to make a motion to approve it, because that's every beginning of the year.
Yeah, it is.
So my recommendation would be that you approve the request or the software purchase of Scrib and Roll
Yes.
as presented by Ms. Lane.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Banks to accept the superintendent's recommendation for the purchase of software Scrib and Roll as presented by Ms. Lane, seconded by Mr. Purcell. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. Dr. Farrell, discuss a memorandum of understanding for construction and acquisition agreement.
This is the agreement between Camden County Government and the Board of Education pertaining to the building of the new high school. It covers things like supervision of the project, payment of the project, use of the grant funds, and so on. County Commissioners approved this MOU on March 1st after a review by the bond attorney, the board's attorney, and the commissioner's attorney. So I would request that you approve this MOU.
You approve of it, Will?
We do.
All right. Motion,
Motion by Mr. Heath to accept the superintendent's recommendation for approval of memorandum of understanding for construction and acquisition agreement.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Purcell. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Policy Code 3220, Technology in the Education Program. Mr. Pasante, Technology Coordinator.
I'll be brief.
Thank you.
We wanted to highlight to the board the proposed revisions to Policy Code 3220 titled Technology in the Education Program. As a district, we've been reviewing our technology policies and feel that we need to include our one-to-one initiative in this policy. A committee was formed to review the present policy, and we are asking the Board of Education to consider the policy changes that the committee has agreed on. Most changes are in Section D of the policy. In general, Section D addresses 1, making technology devices available to every student. 2, how students should use district-owned technology devices. And number 3, asking students and parents to sign forms accepting responsibility for the device issued to the student. And I will summarize the numbered points in Section D. 1 is a school-provided device must only be used by the student the device is assigned to. Number 2, students must comply with the district's technology responsible use policy. Number 3, devices must be returned in the same condition as initially provided to the student, allowing for acceptable wear and tear. Number 4, for take-home devices, students or parents are responsible to reimburse the schools for repair or to repair damaged or destroyed devices. Number 5, the district may require a small technology fee to help with the cost to repair devices. Number 6, students are required to report hardware and software problems within 2 days of problems occurring. Number 7, students are required to report device damage within 2 days of damage occurring. Number 8, if a device is stolen, the student or parent should immediately file a police report. And number 9, students shall bring the issued technology device to school as required. And that completes my summary of the changes to policy 3220. Are there any questions?
My recommendation would be that you table this policy for the customary review.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Islet to accept the superintendent's recommendation to table policy 3220 technology and education program until our next regularly scheduled board meeting. Seconded by Mr. Purcell. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Superintendent Farrell to discuss policy code 2310, public participation in board meetings.
The proposed revision to this policy that I'm presenting to you tonight is to clearly define the time limit, or more clearly define the time limit within the policy itself and on the required forms. On the form to get the materials and the request to the superintendent. So the time limit would be 15 minutes, but would still allow the board chair to have some flexibility in that. So it would state generally 15 minutes. But if the citizen would like to address the board and the topic is longer, the chair has the authority or flexibility to allow that. And then on the actual form, the change would be changing to not less than 6 working days prior to the meeting for them to get the materials to us. Right now, it's 10.
Table policy.
And that would be my recommendation, that you table this policy if you don't have any questions to, I was waiting for questions, sorry, for the review until our next regularly scheduled board meeting.
You made a motion. Second.
Motion by Mr. Purcell to accept the superintendent's recommendation to table policy code 2310, public participation in board meetings until our April regularly scheduled meeting. Seconded by Ms. Idlet. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Farrell to discuss the Camden Early College High School Cooperative Innovative High School renewal.
The early college requires a cooperative innovative high school agreement between the school district and COA. The first year of our agreement was the 2016-2017 school year, and this is the last year of a 5-year renewal cycle. I'm requesting your approval to renew this agreement as required and continue operations as specified in the original agreement.
Is this for another 5 years?
Yes.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Heath to accept the superintendent's recommendation for renewal of the Camden Early College High School Cooperative Innovative High School renewal.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Idlet. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Farrell to discuss reopening of schools.
So as we're all aware, Senate Bill 220, I think it actually made it to the governor's desk today. And so his plan is to sign it this week, which gives him, I guess, 1 or 2 more days to do that. After that time, school districts in North Carolina have 21 days to bring their K-5 students back, which ours already are, on Plan A, and with minimal social distancing, which is not defined in the toolkit, whether that's 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, whatever, you do as much as you possibly can, but it is not defined. It also allows local boards of education to decide to bring 6th through 12th grades back on Plan A or B, also with minimal social distancing. And so obviously that got lots of wheels turning in our schools and school system. This week, I've met with Britton Overton, Director of Transportation, Larry Lawrence. We've talked with Child Nutrition. I reached out to all of our principals to ask them 2 questions. One, what is the earliest you can bring students back to your school on Plan A? Tim, that was what, about October, right? So, but, so we're good at Grandy and in the 4th and 5th grade at CIS, but our other students are still on Plan B. And so the other question that I asked them was, well, let me finish that one. So most of them said March 22nd. There was some discussion about March 29th because of a natural break with a grading period and all that. When I met with transportation, child nutrition can be ready pretty quickly. Transportation recommends March 29th. And so the other question that I asked of principals was, what are your thoughts on continuing remote Wednesdays for the remainder of the school year? Because we do still have to offer Plan C to students who opt into that. Our principals are about to start through their teachers reaching out to families to find out exactly which plan, because students do have the option of switching plans. So with all of that said, my recommendation is going to be that we come back to school for grades 6 through 12 on Plan A, starting on March 29th, and that we continue remote Wednesdays so that teachers have the opportunity to appropriately work with their 100% remote students.
Enthusiastically make that motion. Come back.
Mr. Purcell enthusiastically makes the motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation for grades K or 6 through 12 to come back on Plan A starting March 29th, and for remote Wednesdays to remain in. And this will just be for the remainder of the 2021 school year.
Yes, sir.
I'll enthusiastically second that.
And Dr. Banks enthusiastically seconds that. Is there any further discussion? Enthusiastic discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Farrell, employment of personnel from closed session.
Yes, I recommend that you approve the personnel report as presented by Ms. Anderson in closed session.
Motion by Ms. Eilert to accept the superintendent's recommendation for employment as presented by Ms. Anderson in closed session. Seconded by Mr. Purcell. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Announcements. We'll have a Board of Education meeting Thursday, March 18th at 6 p.m. In the Camden County High School Media Center. Does anybody else have any other announcements? We just, Ms. Kuchel, we will need that meeting advertised as a Board of Education meeting, not a work session. If has no further discussion, entertain a motion to recess open session to return to closed. Motion by Dr. Banks, we recess open session to return to closed session, seconded by Ms. Idlet. All in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're back in closed session. Thank everyone for coming and having a wonderful evening with us.